Hey guys, tonight we are going to travel back in time to a place that looks beautiful in paintings but was, in reality, a masterclass in suffering. We're heading to the 19th century, into the world of the Victorian woman, where beauty wasn't just pain, it was a full-time job with serious occupational hazards. Honestly, if you were dropped into this era with modern sensibilities, you'd probably be declared a rebel, a lunatic, or just mysteriously faint a lot. Surviving the first day would be a genuine achievement. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Your support truly means the world, and as always, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. It's always cool to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You awaken slowly, not to the sharp ring of an alarm, but to a gradual awareness of light. It's a weak, grey light, filtered through heavy, floor-length velvet curtains that refuse to let the morning in. The air in the room is still and cold, carrying a faint, layered scent of lavender water, beeswax from the polished furniture, and the lingering ghost of last night's skull fire. You are lying in a large, four-poster bed, cocooned in starched linen sheets that feel crisp and slightly rough against your skin. For a moment, there is only this: the quiet, the cold, and the soft weight of the duvet. But then, consciousness fully returns, and with it comes the pressure. It's not a physical weight. Not yet. It's a silent, invisible expectation that settles over you before your feet even touch the floor. It is the ideal of what you are supposed to be, the angel in the house. This phrase, born from a popular poem of your time, is your entire job description. You are the moral compass of the home. Your purpose is to be pure, pious, domestic, and, above all, submissive. You are an ornament, a comfort, a walking, breathing symbol of your husband's or father's success. Your role is not to do, but to be, and being, it turns out, is exhausting. You push yourself up, the linen rustling. The bedroom is ornate and shadowed. A dark mahogany wardrobe stands like a silent guard against one wall. A dressing table with a large, silver-backed mirror sits opposite, its surface cluttered with porcelain pots and crystal bottles. There's a small fireplace, its embers long dead, and a plush armchair where a book lies face down, just as you left it. Everything is orderly, beautiful, and profoundly suffocating. The windows are sealed tight against the dreaded night air, a concept your era is deeply suspicious of. The belief is that the miasma, or bad air, that floats around after dark carries disease, so it's best to keep it out. The unfortunate side effect is a stuffy, recycled atmosphere that makes every room feel a little claustrophobic. Your day hasn't even begun, but the script is already written. After a maid helps you dress a lengthy, complex ritual we'll get to shortly, your morning will be spent managing the household staff, planning menus, and ensuring the smooth, silent operation of this domestic machine. The afternoon will be for calling, a rigid social obligation where you leave your card at the homes of other ladies or receive them in your own parlor for tea and polite, carefully coded conversation. You are never to be loud, never to have a strong, unladylike opinion, and certainly never to speak of anything as vulgar as business or politics. Your domain is the home, the heart, the soul, and as you sit on the edge of the bed, the cold floorboards seeping through your thin nightgown, you feel the weight of that spiritual burden. You are expected to be effortlessly graceful, perpetually pleasant, and radiantly healthy, all being encased in garments designed to restrict your every movement and breath. You are to be a creature of ethereal beauty, untouched by the messiness of real life. It's a beautiful, impossible lie. Historians today still debate how deeply this angel in the house ideal penetrated society, whether it was a cage primarily for the middle and upper classes, while working-class women were facing entirely different, more tangible struggles. But for you, in this grand, silent house, The ideal isn't a theory. It is the air you breathe, the standard you measure yourself against every single moment of the day. And as you prepare to face your reflection, you know the first step to becoming this angel involves a battle with your own body. The chill from the floorboard seems to travel right up your spine, prompting you to stand. You can't just throw on a robe and wander downstairs for coffee. That's not how your world works. Instead, you walk to a tasseled robe hanging by the bedpost and give it a firm pull. Somewhere in the depths of the house, a bell jingles, signaling to your lady's maid that you are awake and ready to be assembled. She arrives minutes later, a quiet, efficient presence named Mary. She doesn't say much, she doesn't have to. Your morning routine is a silent, well-rehearsed dance. First, she helps you out of your nightgown and into a chemise, a simple, thin linen shift that will act as a barrier between your skin and the main event. And then, she retrieves it. Your first and most formidable enemy of the day, the corset. It doesn't look like clothing, laid out on the bed. It looks more like a piece of intricate, beautiful, and slightly menacing architecture. It's constructed from stiff, colloidal fabric, reinforced with channels of hollow bone or baleen. To be precise, that's right, the flexible, keratin-OUS plates from a whale's maw, the what will soon be giving you your socially acceptable silhouette. Later in the century, Steele would become more common, adding a new level of unyielding rigidity to the whole affair. The corset is pale pink, embroidered with delicate little flowers, a soft, feminine camouflage for the instrument of compression it truly is. Two long, sturdy laces are threaded through a series of metal eyelets in the back, dangling like twin serpents. You stand straight, holding onto the bedpost for support. This is the part of the day you dread. Mary wraps the corset around your torso, the fabric cold against the thin chemise. She fastens the busk at the front, a set of metal clasps that hold the two heads together. You take a deep breath, your last full, uninhibited breath for the next 16 hours. And then the tightening begins. Mary moves to your back and takes a lace in each hand. She pulls. The corset cinches instantly, squeezing the air from your lungs with a soft whoosh. Your entire midsection is being gathered, compressed, and molded. This isn't about gentle support, it's about brute force. She pulls again, her own body tensing with the effort. Sometimes, for a particularly fashionable silhouette, a maid might brace her foot against the base of your spine or the bedpost to get more leverage. The goal is to shrink your waist to an impossibly small circumference. The ideal, the one whispered about in magazines and glorified in illustrations, is a waist of 18, maybe even 16 inches. Think about that for a second. That's smaller than the circumference of a modern dinner plate. You feel a powerful, unyielding pressure wrapping around your lower ribs. Your posture is immediately forced into an upright, ramrod straight position. Slouching is now physically impossible. Breathing becomes a conscious, deliberate effort, restricted to the very top of your lungs. These shallow little sips of air will have to be enough to get you through the day. This practice of extreme cinching is called tight lacing, and it's a hot topic. While fashion demanded a small waist, there is a significant debate among historians about how many women actually pursued those dangerously tiny 16-inch measurements. Was it a widespread reality, or more like the Photoshop bodies of today, an extreme, unattainable ideal that most women simply try to approximate? The evidence is conflicting. Diaries and letters from the period describe the pain and the ambition, but skeletal remains don't always show the extreme warping we might expect, suggesting that perhaps most women wore their corsets more moderately. But even moderate corseting was a serious business. And here's a bizarre little tidbit for you: some of the most dedicated followers of fashion would even sleep in a night corset. This was a slightly less aggressive corset used for training the waist, gradually compressing the body into the desired shape around the clock. The belief was that if you endured this discomfort while you slept, achieving the perfect daytime figure would be easier. So just imagine, no rest, no respite, just 24/8 compression. The lacing is finally done. Mary ties the laces off in a neat, firm down, You are now fully encased. Your body is no longer your own. It has been sculpted into a fashionable hourglass shape, with a high, pronounced bust and a dramatically small waist. You turn to face the mirror, and the woman staring back at you is taller, straighter, and undeniably more ladylike. But the face is a little paler, and the eyes hold a strained, distant look. The angel is taking shape, but the human inside is already paying the price. And the first casualties of this daily battle are your own bones. With the corset locked in place, you take a moment to assess the immediate effects. The first thing you notice is the rigidity. You are an articulated doll now, able to bend only at the hips and neck. Your torso is a solid, unyielding column. You try to take a deep breath, an involuntary instinct, but your diaphragm hits a wall. The hollow bone cage around your ribs doesn't give. It simply presses back, a constant, firm reminder of its dominion. This is the war on your bones, and your skeleton is losing. Let's talk about what's happening to your rib cage. Normally, your ribs are a flexible, protective framework. The lower ones, often called floating ribs, are designed to move, expanding outward as you breathe to allow your lungs to fill completely. Your corset, however, has declared these floating ribs to be a design flaw. The intense, focused pressure of tight lacing is squeezing them inward, forcing them closer together, and sometimes even causing them to overlap. Over years of this daily compression, your own skeleton will begin to deform, permanently. Imagine your lower torso as a soft lump of clay. The corset is the sculptor's hand, relentlessly squeezing under, shaping it. The bones, especially when this process starts in a woman's teenage years when her skeleton is still developing, are surprisingly malleable. They bend to the will of fashion. X-rays of women from this period, as well as examinations of skeletal remains, have shown ribs that are visibly pinched inward, creating a permanently constricted, almost conical shape at the base of the thorax. It's a skeletal signature left behind by a lifetime of striving for the perfect waist. You feel this happening in real time. A dull ache is already starting to radiate from your lower back. Your spine, forced into an unnaturally straight posture, is under strain. The corset acts like a full-body brace, and while it enforces proper posture, it also causes the muscles in your back and abdomen to atrophy. Why would they need to work when the hollow bone is doing all the supporting? This creates a cycle of dependency. The more you wear the corset, the weaker your core muscles become, making it almost impossible to stand or sit upright without it. Taking it off at the end of the day won't just bring relief, it will bring a feeling of total physical collapse, as your untrained muscles struggle to support the weight of your own body. Historians and medical professionals of your time were actually well aware of these dangers. Medical journals were filled with articles decrying the corset, complete with terrifying anatomical drawings showing warped skeletons and displaced organs. Doctors railed against it, blaming it for everything from consumption to curved spines. And yet, the fashion persisted. The visual ideal was more powerful than any medical warning. Here's a curious detail. Proponents of corsetry had their own scientific arguments. They claimed the corset provided essential support for the weaker female frame. They argued it promoted good posture, prevented unladylike slouching, and even protected delicate internal organs from jostling. Some even believed it had moral benefits, suggesting that the physical restraint of the corset helped to restrain a woman's supposedly flighty and emotional nature. It was a perfect piece of circular logic. Society deemed women weak, forced them into a garment that made them physically weaker, and then pointed to their weakness as proof that they needed the garment in the first place. You run a hand over the smooth fabric covering your side. Beneath your fingers, you can feel the unyielding ridges of the baleen. You are acutely aware of your own bones, not as a silent framework, but as something under siege. Every shallow breath you take is a reminder of the compromise you've made. You've traded freedom of movement for a fashionable silhouette. You've traded deep, life-giving breaths for a waist that your society has deemed beautiful. The debate about the precise long-term effects of moderate versus tight lacing is still active among scholars. Some argue that for the average woman, the corset was more of a supportive garment, akin to a modern bra, and that the horror stories of extreme deformation were exceptions. Others maintain that any level of daily, rigid corseting would have inevitably led to some degree of musculoelastic change and chronic health issues. But as you stand there, feeling the pinch, you're not thinking about academic debates. You are simply feeling the pressure. The war on your bones has been won by the corset, but the battle is now moving deeper, into the soft, vulnerable territory of your internal organs, which are about to experience a very crowded and unpleasant day. The external transformation is complete. You have the shape, the posture, the silhouette of a proper Victorian lady, but inside, we're silent. Chaotic rearrangement is taking place. Your internal organs are being forced to play a desperate game of musical chairs, and there aren't enough seats for everyone. This is the part of the experience that the beautiful fashion plates' unelegant portraits never show you. This is the unseen, unglamorous reality of what it takes to achieve that tiny waist. Let's start at the top. Your lungs, as we've established, are only working at about 75–80% capacity. You are in a state of perpetual, mild oxygen deprivation. But it's what's happening below the diaphragm that's truly dramatic. The corset acts like a vice, and the primary victim of this downward pressure is your liver. Your liver, normally nestled comfortably on the right side of your abdomen under your diaphragm, is being pushed down and squeezed. Its soft tissue is being compressed, sometimes so severely that it develops what doctors of the time called corset liver. This wasn't just a turn of phrase, it was a visible, physical deformity. Autopsies performed on long-term corset wearers revealed a deep, permanent groove etched across the surface of the liver, a literal scar left by the constant pressure of the lower ribs being forced into it. This compression could impede blood flow and, over time, affect the organ's ability to function properly, impairing its vital role in filtering toxins from your blood. Next to the liver, your stomach is also feeling the squeeze. It's being pushed downward and flattened, significantly reducing its capacity. This is why you will only be able to eat small, delicate meals today. A large, hearty meal is a physical impossibility. There simply isn't room. If you were to try, you would experience painful indigestion, acid reflux, and a suffocating feeling of fullness. This is one reason why the stereotype of the Victorian woman with a delicate appetite existed. It wasn't always a choice, it was a physical limitation imposed by her underwear. The chaos continues its cascade downwards. Your intestines, both small and large, are being shoved down into the lower abdomen and pelvic cavity, creating a cramped, tangled mess. This constant compression can severely slow down digestion, leading to chronic constipation, a common and miserable complaint among women of your era. The natural, rhythmic contractions of the intestines that move food along are hampered by the unyielding pressure from all sides. This digestive slowdown was so common that the market was flooded with laxatives and all sorts of digestive aids, all promising relief from a problem whose root cause was tied up with string and hollowbone every morning. Historians are still piecing together the full extent of these internal consequences. While much of the evidence comes from 19th century medical texts, which can sometimes be prone to exaggeration, modern medical analysis confirms the plausibility of these effects. The principle is simple physics. If you apply that much external pressure to a closed system, something has to give. The internal organs, being soft and pliable, are what give way. The real question that scholars still debate is one of degree. Just how much displacement and damage did the average woman experience compared to the extreme tight laces who became cautionary tales in medical journals? And for a truly bizarre side effect, let's talk about the spleen. Some medical reports from the era noted cases where the spleen, also being pushed around, would sometimes get stuck in an abnormal position, leading to a condition known as a wandering spleen. This could cause chronic pain and, in some severe cases, The organ could twist on its own blood supply, creating a medical emergency. It's a strange and terrifying thought that your own spleen could just go for a walk because of your clothing. You stand motionless before the mirror, the maid now beginning to pile petticoats over your corseted frame. You don't see the turmoil inside. You only feel it as a vague, dull ache deep in your abdomen, a familiar sensation you've learned to ignore. You feel a slight lightheadedness from the lack of oxygen, a faint nausea from your compressed stomach. This is your normal. This is the price of beauty. The silent scream of your organs is the soundtrack to your day. Constant, low-grade misery that you've been taught to interpret as feminine delicacy. And this constant state of physical distress, this lack of air and compressed digestion, has a very public and very predictable consequence. You are now fully dressed, layers of petticoats, a heavy skirt, a tight bodice dress, and perhaps a shawl have been added over your corseted frame. The total weight of your clothing could be anywhere from 10 to 20 pounds. You are a walking work of art, and just as constrained. As you prepare to descend the stairs to the drawing room, you feel a familiar wave of dizziness wash over you. The room tilts slightly, the edges of your vision blurring for a moment. You instinctively place a hand on the wall to steady yourself. This is the prelude to one of the most iconic and misunderstood phenomena of your era, the faint. Fainting, or syncope, became so common among middle and upper class women that it was almost a cliché. In novels, plays, and popular imagination, the Victorian woman is perpetually swooning. She faints from shock, from grief, from delicate sensibilities, from a passionate declaration of love. It was often portrayed as a sign of exquisite sensitivity and refined breeding. But the reality was far less romantic and far more physiological. You are, quite simply, a walking candidate for a fainting spell. Let's break down the science of your swoon. The primary culprit is your old friend, the corset. By severely restricting your ability to breathe deeply, it has already put you in a state of chronic low-level hypoxia, or oxygen deprivation. Your brain isn't getting the steady, rich supply of oxygen it needs to function optimally. This alone makes you susceptible to lightheadedness. But there's more. The constant immense pressure on your abdomen also affects your circulatory system. It can impede the return of blood from your lower body back up to your heart. When you stand for long periods, as you are required to do during social calls or receptions, blood can begin to pool in your legs. If something happens that causes a sudden drop in your blood pressure, for example, standing up too quickly, becoming overheated in a crowded room, or experiencing a strong emotion your body can't compensate fast enough, the reduced blood flow to the heart means even less oxygenated blood gets pumped to the brain. The result is predictable: your vision tunnels. A cold sweat breaks out on your brow, and you gracefully collapse. The very architecture of your social life seems designed to induce this. Imagine yourself in a crowded ballroom. The air is thick with the heat from gas lights and hundreds of breathing bodies. You are wearing heavy clothes and can't take a full breath. You've been standing for an hour, making polite conversation. Someone tells you a piece of startling news. It's the perfect storm for a fainting spell. It became so commonplace that society developed an entire etiquette around it. Men were expected to catch the fainting lady. Nearby women would rush to loosen her collar and, if they were discreet, the top laces of her corset. Smelling salts, a potent combination of ammonium carbonate and perfume, were a standard accessory, kept in ornate little vials in every lady's purse. The sharp, pungent smell would jolt the senses and, in theory, shock the system enough to revive the fainter. Special fainting rooms or fainting couches were even incorporated into the design of wealthy homes and public venues, providing a designated space for women to recover from these episodes. Here's a peculiar twist: while the fainting was real, it could also be weaponized. In a society where you have very little direct power, fainting could become a form of passive communication. Are you trapped in a boring conversation? A slight swoon might offer an escape. Does your husband or father deny your request? A well-timed collapse could evoke guilt and sympathy, perhaps leading him to reconsider. Historians still debate how often fainting was a genuine medical event versus a calculated social maneuver. The truth is likely a murky blend of both. The physical predisposition was always there, making it an easy and believable tool to use when needed. It was a physical manifestation of the angel in the house, ideal a demonstration of your delicate, sensitive nature that was, ironically, caused by the very garments meant to create your perfect, angelic form. You take a slow, shallow breath, and the dizziness subsides. You are not going to faint. Not yet. You have a long day ahead. But the feeling lingers as a subtle warning. Your body is on a knife's edge. It is a finely tuned machine running on minimal fuel and under constant strain. And as you finally make your way to the social battlefield of the parlor, you know that the next stage of your transformation from human to angel will take place at your dressing table, where a connection of beautiful poisons awaits. After navigating the morning's domestic duties, a period of quiet descends upon the house. Now is the time for the second phase of your daily construction, your face. You retreat to your bedroom and take a seat at the dressing table. The surface is an arsenal of feminine artistry, a landscape of ornate containers promising beauty, youth, and perfection. There are delicate porcelain pots filled with creams, silver-lidded glass jars containing powders, and crystal flagons of scented water. It all looks so lovely, so refined, but this is the most dangerous corner of your entire house. Your dressing table is a poisonous cabinet in disguise. You gaze into the large, silver-framed mirror. The face looking back at you is pale from the restricted breathing, and there are faint, bluish shadows under your eyes. The ideal of beauty in your era is one of startling pallor. And/or ruddy complexion is associated with the working class, with people who toil outdoors in the sun. My lady's skin, by contrast, must be a testament to her life of leisure, smooth, white, and fragile, almost translucent. It's a look that screams, I have never labored a day in my life. This aesthetic is often described by art historians as the beauty of consumption, as it mimicked the delicate, ethereal look of those suffering from tuberculosis, a disease tragically romanticized at the time. To achieve this coveted pallor, you cannot rely on nature alone. You must turn to your pots and potions, and this is where the trouble begins. The science of cosmetics is in its infancy. There is no regulation, no ingredient lists, no FDA. The preparations available to you are a cocktail of folk remedies, kitchen chemistry, and highly toxic heavy metals. The women who sell you these concoctions, often from their own homes, are not chemists. They are simply brewers of beauty, mixing recipes passed down through generations or found in ladies' magazines. You pick up a small, heavy porcelain pot. It's cool to the touch. Inside is a thick, white cream. This will be the foundation of your look. It promises to smooth your skin, hide any blemishes, and bestow that all-important ghostly glow. It will also, slowly and insidiously, poison you, because the key ingredient for achieving that perfect, opaque white finish is lead. Next to it sits another jar, this one containing a pearl powder for dusting over the cream to set it and remove any shine. It's also lid-based, a small container of rouge, meant to give just a hint of a delicate consumptum flush to your cheeks. Might be colored with vermilion, a pigment derived from mercury sulfide. Even your eyeshadows could be problematic, with some green shades being made with arsenic. Here's a small, chilling detail about the marketing of these products. They were often sold under beautiful, alluring names that gave no hint of their contents. You might purchase a face cream called Lily of the Valley or a powder named Bloom of Ninan. The most famous and widely used lead-based cosmetic was a lotion called Lead's Bloom of Youth. It was sold for decades, promising to preserve and beautify the complexion while slowly causing systemic lead poisoning in its devoted users. The irony is staggering, a product named Bloom of Youth that accelerated aging and decay. The historical debate around this topic is not about whether these products were toxic. They absolutely were. The question is about awareness. Did you, the Victorian woman, know you were painting your face with poison? The answer is complicated. On one hand, the dangers of lead and mercury had been known in a medical and industrial context for centuries. Doctors certainly wrote about the risks. On the other hand, this information didn't always trickle down to the consumer, especially when it was packaged so prettily and endorsed by high society. You might have heard whispers or warnings, but they would be competing with magazine advertisements, the advice of your friends, and the overwhelming social pressure to look a certain way. It's the same cognitive dissonance we see today, where people might know something is bad for them but continue to do it for a perceived benefit. You unscrew the lid of the first pot. The cream inside smells faintly of rosewater, a pleasant scent designed to mask the metallic undertone of the lead. You dip your fingertips into the pot. The cream is smooth and cool. As you lift your hand to your face, you're about to apply the first layer of a perfect, beautiful, and deadly mask. The quest for flawless skin is about to begin, and it will be a slow, methodical process of self-destruction. You begin to apply the white cream to your face. With gentle, circular motions, you smooth the cool, thick paste over your forehead, your cheeks, your nose, your chin. The product is called a liquid powder or an enamel, and the effect is immediate and dramatic. It's like applying a thin layer of plaster. Your skin tone evens out, freckles and minor blemishes vanish, and your complexion transforms from that of a breathing person into something more akin to porcelain or marble. You are erasing your own face and replacing it with an idealized, artificial one. The key ingredient making this possible is lead carbonate, often referred to as white lead. It's a heavy, opaque pigment that has been used for centuries in paint and cosmetics. It provides incredible coverage, which is why it's so popular. It delivers the exact look you're after. What you don't see, and what you may only vaguely suspect, is that the lead is already beginning its insidious work. It doesn't just sit on top of your skin, it is absorbed through your pores, entering your bloodstream. This is not a one-time risk. This is your daily routine. Every day, you are administering a small dose of a pontnuric toxin. At first, the effects might even seem beneficial. In a strange way, lead has astringent properties, so it can dry out oily skin and shrink pores, initially making your complexion look even better. This creates a vicious cycle. The lead makes your skin look good in the short term, so you keep using it. But the long-term consequences are devastating. Chronic lead poisoning is a slow, creeping horror. It mimics other illnesses, making it difficult to diagnose. The initial symptoms are things you might easily dismiss: fatigue, headaches, a metallic taste in your mouth, and general irritability. You might feel perpetually unwell. But, in a world where women are considered inherently fragile, these complaints would likely be brushed aside as nerves or female troubles. As the lead accumulates in your body, the symptoms become more severe. It attacks your nervous system, leading to tremors, muscle weakness, and eventually, paralysis in the hands and feet known as wrist drop or foot drop. It attacks your digestive system, causing intense abdominal pain, a condition known as lead colic. Your gums will develop a telltale sign, a thin, blue-black line known as a Burton's line, as the lead reacts with sulfur in your mouth. Your hair will begin to thin and fall out. Your teeth will decay. Your skin, the very thing you were trying to perfect, will eventually take on a ghastly, grayish pallor, becoming dry and wrinkled as the lead damages the underlying tissues. To combat these effects, what do? You apply more of the lead-based cream to cover up the damage, driving the poison deeper and accelerating your own decline. It is a perfect, brutal trap. The product that promises beauty is the very thing that destroys it. Here's a bizarre and tragic little fact: because lead poisoning also caused neurological symptoms like confusion and memory loss. Some women were mistakenly diagnosed as mentally ill and could even end up in asylums. Their physical and mental deterioration was a direct result of their cosmetic routine, but it was misinterpreted as madness. The historical evidence for this is undeniable. The case of Maria Gunning, the Countess of Coventry, is one of the most famous examples from the century before yours, but her story was a cautionary tale that echoed into your era. I celebrated beauty. She was known for her heavy use of white lid makeup. She died in 1760 at the age of 27, and it was widely believed that her death was a direct result of lead poisoning from her cosmetics. Her story became a warning, yet the practice continued, a testament to the power of beauty standards over self-preservation. Scholars today still analyze accounts and medical records to understand the full scope of this public health crisis hiding in plain sight. The debate often centers on how many women made the connection between their failing health and their makeup pots. Did they know and feel they had no choice? Or were they truly unaware, blaming their symptoms on a weak constitution or some other mysterious ailment? You finish your application. You look in the mirror and see a flawless, élastimose. It is perfect. It is the face of an angel. You are beautiful. But the woman in the mirror is now a ghost in the making, haunted by the very substance she uses to perfect her image. And the lead is not the only poison on your dressing table. Your quest for perfection has another, equally dangerous ally waiting in the next little pot. Now that the lid foundation has created your perfectly white canvas, it's time to deal with any stubborn imperfections that might still threaten to peek through. Perhaps you have a few freckles scornfully called sun kisses by those who don't have them, or some blemishes that even the thick enamel couldn't fully conceal. For this, you turn to a different, even more potent potion. You pick up a small, milky glass jar labeled something innocuous like Dr. O. Mackenzie's celebrated freckle remover Olgarod's Oriental Cream. You twist open the lid. The cream inside is smooth and white. You dab a tiny amount onto your fingertip and carefully apply it to the offending spots. This cream works like magic. Within a few days of use, freckles fade, and blemishes seem to vanish. It's a miracle in a jar. But this miracle is powered by mercury. Specifically, the active ingredient is often mercuric chloride or ammonia-ted mercury. Highly toxic compounds that work by destroying the melanin-producing cells in your skin. In essence, it's not fading your freckles, it's chemically burning them away on a cellular level. It peels off the top layer of your skin, which is why it appears to work so well at first. You are literally removing the flawed part of your epidermis. Just like lead, mercury is readily absorbed through the skin and begins to build up in your body. And mercury poisoning is, if anything, even more terrifying than lead poisoning. It has a particular affinity for your central nervous system and your brain. The phrase mad as a hatter comes from this very poison. Hat makers in your century used a mercury solution to felt beaver fur, and the constant exposure to the fumes drove many of them insane. You are now willingly applying that same class of poison directly to your face. The symptoms of chronic mercury poisoning are insidious. They begin with excessive salivation under metallic taste, much like lead. But then, the neurological effects kick in. You might start to feel a strained, persistent tingling or numbness in your fingers and toes. Your hands might develop a slight, uncontrollable shake, the mercurial tremor. Your personality could begin to change. You might become uncharacteristically shy, anxious, and withdrawn, or prone to sudden, inexplicable fits of anger or depression, memory loss, insomnia, and terrifyingly vivid nightmares are also common. Your physical appearance will suffer just as much. Mercury attacks the gums, causing them to become spongy and inflamed. Your teeth will loosen and fall out. Your breath will take on a foul odor. It can cause kidney damage, leading to organ failure. In a cruel twist of irony, prolonged use of mercury creams can lead to a permanent, slate-gray discoloration of the skin, the exact opposite of the clear, pale complexion you were trying to achieve. One of the most chilling details about these mercury-based remedies is that they were sometimes used on children. Freckles were seen as so undesirable that mothers, with the best of intentions, would apply these toxic creams to their children's faces, hoping to give them the social advantage of a perfect complexion, unaware that they were poisoning them in the process. Historians often face a challenge in definitively proving cause and effect in individual cases from the past. as the symptoms of mercury poisoning overlap with so many other conditions of the era. However, the widespread availability and advertisement of these products, combined with the descriptions of mysterious illnesses in diaries and medical texts, creates a compelling, if circumstantial, body of evidence. The debate isn't about the toxicity of mercury, which is a scientific fact, but rather about untangling its specific impact from the general miasma of poor health, restrictive clothing, and other environmental toxins of the 19th century. How many cases of female hysteria or nervous collapse were actually undiagnosed cases of heavy metal poisoning from cosmetics? It's a question that can likely never be fully answered. You screw the lid back on the jar of freckle remover. You can't see the poison. You can't feel it working. Not yet. You only see the result, a small brown spot that is now slightly less visible. You see progress. You see yourself moving one step closer to the flawless ideal. The mirror reflects a woman of quiet, pale, and composed beauty. It does not show the mercury slowly crossing her blood-brain barrier. It does not show the storm that is beginning to gather within her own mind. And for some women, the quest for perfection didn't stop with poisons you applied to the outside. There were also poisons you could choose to take on the inside. Your face is now a perfect, pale mask, free of blemishes. But the ideal of consumptive beauty requires more than just whiteness. It requires a certain translucence. The skin should be so delicate that it looks almost luminous, as if lit from within. This is a subtle, high-fashion effect that simple topical creams can't quite achieve. To get this look, the truly dedicated might turn to a beauty secret whispered about in the most daring circles. It's not something you apply, it's something you ingest. You consider the small, beautifully decorated box you keep hidden at the back of your vanity drawer. It contains Dr. Campbell's arsenic complexion wafers. The advertisement in the ladies' magazine promised they would produce a transparently clear and brilliant complexion and a plumpness and rounding of the figure. The wafers themselves are small, white, and look as harmless as breath mints. The key ingredient, as the name proudly and shockingly proclaims, is arsenic. Yes, that arsenic, the famous rat poison, the preferred to love fictional and real-life murderers. In your era, it has found a second life as a cosmetic. The logic behind this madness is based on a real, observable phenomenon. People who were exposed to small, non-lethal doses of arsenic, like the arsenic eaters of Styria, a region in modern-day Austria, did exhibit certain physical changes. Arsenic can destroy red blood cells, which lends the skin a pale, anemic look. It also causes a slight swelling in the subcutaneous tissues, which can smooth out wrinkles and give the face that plumpness the ad promises. The overall effect is a smooth, pale, and strangely waxy complexion that, to the 19th century eye, looked ethereal and beautiful. So you take a tiny nibble of the wafer. The idea is to build up a tolerance, starting with a minuscule dose and gradually increasing it. It's a game of toxicological roulette. Too much, too fast, and you'll experience acute arsenic poisoning, violent stomach cramps, vomiting, and a swift, painful death. But just the right amount, taken consistently, leads to chronic poisoning, which is a much slower, stranger journey. The initial effects are the desired ones. Your skin does take on that coveted translucent quality. But arsenic is a cumulative poison. It builds up in your body, particularly in your hair and fingernails. The side effects begin subtly. You might notice a garlicky odor on your breath and sweat. You might experience persistent digestive issues, alternating between constipation and diarrhea. Then, more noticeable changes appear. You might develop dark, wart-like growths on your hands and feet. Strange lines of discoloration, called Mies lines, might appear on your fingernails. And then comes the neurological damage. Tingling, numbness, confusion, and eventually, a creeping paralysis that starts in the extremities. It can cause goitres, a swelling of the thyroid gland in your neck. It's a non-carcinogen, significantly increasing your risk of skin, lung, and bladder cancer. You are, in essence, systematically poisoning every organ system in your body for the sake of a fashionable complexion. One of the most bizarre and dangerous aspects of arsenic eating was the dependency it created. Once you started, it was incredibly difficult to stop. Attempting to quit would cause a violent withdrawal. Your body, having adapted to the poison, would react as if it were being deprived of a necessary nutrient. The plumpness would vanish, your skin would seem to wither overnight, and you'd experience severe digestive distress and palpitations. For many, it was easier to continue taking the poison than to endure the horror of stopping. The historical debate here is fascinating. While the existence of arsenic complexion wafers is well documented through advertisements on court cases, a central question for historians is how widespread was this practice really? Was it a niche, shocking habit of a few daring individuals, or was it a more common, if well hidden, secret among fashionable women? The secretive nature of the practice makes it incredibly difficult to quantify. Unlike a corset, arsenic leaves no skeletal trace, and its symptoms could be easily mistaken for other diseases. It remains one of the most extreme and debated aspects of Victorian cosmetic history. You place the half-eaten wafer back in its box. Perhaps that's enough for today. The risk feels very real. But so does the pressure to be beautiful. You are playing a long game with your own health, balancing the promise of beauty against the threat of a slow, agonizing decay. You've poisoned your skin with lead. You've damaged your nerves with mercury. And now you've ingested a known killer for a hint of luminescence. Your transformation is nearly complete. There's just one more feature to perfect your eyes. And for that, you'll need another drop of poison. You've constructed the perfect canvas face of pale, smooth, and luminous perfection. Now for the finishing touch. The feature that poets and painters obsess over: the eyes. The fashionable eye is not just an organ of sight, it is a tool of communication, meant to be expressive, alluring, and soulful. The ideal look is dark, mysterious, and slightly melancholy. To achieve this, you need your pupils to be as large and dark as possible, creating a stark contrast with the iris and giving your gaze a deep, captivating quality. Nature, however, doesn't always cooperate. Your pupils dilate and constrict based on light and emotion, not fashion trends. So to force them into a state of perpetual, alluring darkness, you turn to one last bottle on your vanity. This one is small, with a dropper cap. It contains a clear liquid, an extract from a plant with a deceptively beautiful name, belladonna. Belladonna. It literally translates from Italian to beautiful lady. The name itself tells a story. For centuries, women have used the juice of the nightshade berry to enhance their eyes. The plant contains a potent alkaloid called atropine, a substance that modern ophthalmologists still use to dilate patients' eyes for examinations. You are about to perform this same medical procedure on yourself, for cosmetic reasons. Leaning close to the mirror, you steady your hand. You tilt your head back and carefully squeeze a single drop of the belladonna solution into each eye. The liquid stings for a moment, and your eyes water. You blink rapidly, and then you wait. Within minutes, the atropine begins to work its magic. It blocks the receptors in the muscles of your iris that are responsible for constriction. Your pupils, now unable to shrink, expand dramatically. They open wide, swallowing up much of the color of your iris, leaving behind huge, dark pools. You look back in the mirror, and the effect is undeniable. Your eyes look enormous, luminous, and full of a strange, unfocused intensity. It's a look that is both striking and unsettling. But this beauty comes at an immediate and significant cost. The first thing you notice is that your vision has become blurry. Your pupils are no longer able to constrict to focus light properly, especially for new tasks. Reading a book, doing embroidery, or even clearly seeing the face of the person you're talking to becomes difficult. The world dissolves into a soft, hazy blur. The second effect is extreme light sensitivity, or photophobia. With your pupils stuck in the open position, You have no defense against bright light. Stepping outside on a sunny day would be agonizing. Even a brightly lit room can cause a painful, squinting glare. This is one reason why the Victorian parlor, with its heavy curtains on dim gas lighting, was the perfect environment for a belladonna-enhanced beauty. The dimness was not just a matter of fashion, it was a practical necessity for anyone using this particular cosmetic trick. These are just the short-term effects. The long-term risks are far more serious. Regular use of belladonna can lead to a permanent increase in intraocular pressure, significantly raising your risk of developing glaucoma, a condition that can lead to irreversible blindness. It could also cause painful eye inflammation and, in some cases, even contact dermatitis on the eyelids. And, of course, there's the ever-present risk of systemic poisoning. Belladonna is highly toxic if ingested. The difference between a cosmetic dose and a lethal dose is frighteningly small. A slight miscalculation, accidentally swallowing a drop, or using a solution that is too concentrated could lead to a racing heart, dry mouth, confusion, hallucinations, and, in severe cases, paralysis and death. It's the plant that killed Juliet in Shakespeare's play. After all, you are literally putting your life on the line for bigger pupils. The historical context for this is fascinating because it walks a fine line between medicine and cosmetics. Atropine was a known induced drug, so its effects were well understood by doctors. The debate among historians is, once again, about the prevalence of this practice among the general female population. Was it a trick reserved for actresses and courtesans, the fast women of society, or was it a more common secret, passed between friends preparing for a big ball given the immediate and obvious side effects, like blurred vision? It was likely not an everyday practice for most. It was probably saved for special occasions where making a stunning visual impact was worth a few hours of being unable to see properly. You blink your wide, dark, blurry eyes at your reflection. The effect is complete. You have a face that is pale as marble, skin that is unnaturally translucent, and eyes that are dark and mysterious pools. You have become a work of art, but you are a piece of art that can barely see, that is running on low oxygen, whose organs are being crushed, and whose entire system is being slowly saturated with a cocktail of heavy metals and plant-based toxins, and you haven't even done your hair yet. The construction of your face is complete, a masterpiece of dangerous chemistry. Now, your lady's maid, Mary, returns for the final, and arguably most laborious, part of your transformation: your hair. In the Victorian era, a woman's hair was not just hair. It was her crown in glory, a potent symbol of her femininity, health, and even her morality. Long, thick, and healthy hair was considered a woman's greatest natural asset, but achieving the era's fashionable hairstyles was anything but natural. It was an architectural and engineering feat that came with its own unique set of pains. Use it at your vanity while Mary unpins your long hair from its simple nighttime braid. It falls down your back, a heavy curtain of brown silk, to be considered beautiful. Your hair must be long, very long. It was not uncommon for women to have hair that reached their waist, or even their knees. This incredible length was cultivated from childhood, and cutting it was almost unthinkable, associated with mourning, illness, or social rebellion. Today's style requires an elaborate updo. The fashion of the mid to late 19th century favored hairstyles of immense volume and complexity. We're talking intricate braids, called chignon-ons, cascading curls, and towering arrangements that would make a modern stylist weep. Your hair will be parted, twisted, braided, curled, and pinned into a structure that seems to defy gravity. Mary begins by brushing, and brushing, and brushing. The 100 strokes a night rule was a genuine belief, thought to distribute the scalp's natural oils and keep the hair healthy and lustrous. With hair this long, simply detangling it is a time-consuming task. Then, the construction begins. Mary sections your hair. Her fingers moving with practiced skill, she creates a foundation. often by twisting and pinning the back section of your hair into a firm base. Then, she begins to build upon it. Braids are formed and then coiled into rosettes and pinned into place. The front sections are swept up and back, creating heightened volume around your face. Tendrils might be artfully left to dangle by your ears or at the nape of your neck, but they are not accidental, they are carefully planned elements of the overall design. The sheer weight of all this hair, piled high on top of your head, is the first thing you notice. A dull, pulling sensation begins at your scalp. As the day wears on, this will blossom into a full-blown tension headache. The constant, unrelenting pull on the hair follicles is a common source of chronic pain for women of your time. Medical journals even had a name for it: neurogalia of the scalp. But the weight doesn't just come from your own hair. Here we come to one of the great deceptions of the Victorian era. Almost no one had enough of their own hair to create the most fashionable, voluminous styles. To achieve the necessary bulk, you rely on a vast array of hairpieces. These included rat's small, sausage-shaped pads made of horsehair or your own connected hair from your brush, over which your natural hair was arranged to create volume, as well as full switches, curls, and braided extensions made from other people's hair. Your magnificent, elaborate coiffure was a lie, a scaffold of dead hair and padding hidden beneath a thin veneer of your own. This extra material adds significant weight. It wasn't uncommon for a finished hairstyle to weigh a pound or two, or even more. Imagine strapping a bag of sugar to the top of your head and carrying it around all day. This constant load puts a tremendous strain not just on your scalp, but on your neck muscles and cervical spine. Chronic neck pain and stiffness were simply part of the package. The historical debate around this is less about if these practices caused pain and more about the social perception of it. Was it acknowledged as a source of suffering? Or was it so normalized that women were expected to endure it without complaint? The evidence from diaries and letters suggests it was a well-known misery. Women wrote about their sick headaches and the immense relief of taking their hair down at the end of the day. Yet, in public, the ideal was one of effortless grace. The pain, like the hair rats hidden beneath the braids, was a private matter, not to be acknowledged. You watch in the mirror as the structure on your head grows more and more elaborate. It's beautiful, a testament to Mary's skill, but it feels less like a hairstyle and more like a helmet. It's tight, heavy, and restrictive. You know that turning your head too quickly will be a mistake. The day will be a series of slow, deliberate movements. The crown of aches is now firmly in place. But the torture of the hair isn't over. The braids and coils are just the foundation. Now, it's time to add the curls, and that requires a trial by fire. The main structure of your hairstyle is complete, a solid, heavy mass of braids and coils. But fashion dictates that it must be softened with delicate, feminine curls, particularly around your face and in the tendrils at your neck. These curls must be perfect, uniform, bouncy, and able to hold their shape for hours. Achieving this in an era before electric styling tools requires a rather brutal process. It is time for the trial by hot iron. Mary takes a set of curling tongs from a stand near the fireplace. These are not the sleek, ceramic-coated ones you might imagine. They are simple, heavy, cast-iron implements that look more like something you'd find in a blacksmith's shop than on a lady's vanity. They consist of two arms, one a solid rod and the other a curved clamp, hinged together. There is no temperature control, no on-off switch. Their heat source is the open flame of a gas lamp or the embers of the coal fire. She places the tongs directly into the flames to heat them. This part of the process is a dangerous guessing game. Too cold, and the curl won't sit. Too hot, and the consequences are disastrous. Mary, an experienced maid, has her own method for testing the temperature. She pulls the glowing tongs from the fire and holds a piece of brown paper between the clamps. If the paper turns a light, yellowish-brown, the heat is just right. If it smokes or scorches to a dark brown, the iron is too hot and could singe your hair right off. Use it perfectly still. Try not to flinch as she brings the heated metal tool close to your face. You can feel the wave of heat on your cheek. She takes one of the carefully prepared tendrils, wraps it around the hot rod, and clamps it shut. A wisp of steam rises from your hair, carrying a faint, toasted scent. You hold your breath, praying she got the temperature right. A moment of sizzling silence, and then she carefully unrolls the towel, revealing a perfectly formed spiral curl. It's a success. Now repeat that process for every single curl and wrinkle the style requires. Each time, it's a small act of faith. You are placing your trust in your maid's judgment, hoping she doesn't get distracted, misjudge the heat, or let her hand slip. The risks are very real. A slight tremor of the hand could result in a painful burn on your scalp, ear, or neck. These burns were a common domestic accident, and in an era before modern antibiotics, even a small burn could become infected and lead to serious complications. And then there's the damage to the hair itself. This repeated application of unregulated, intense heat is incredibly destructive. It boils the moisture right out of the hair shaft, making it brittle, dry, and prone to breakage. The ends of your beautifully curled tendrils are likely split and damaged, a fact that can be hidden with a bit of pomade but is nonetheless a sign of the daily trauma your hair endures. It's a strange paradox in the quest to make your hair look healthy and vibrant. You are literally cooking it to death. Here's a peculiar little side note on the class dynamics of hairstyling. For a wealthy woman like you, this dangerous task is outsourced to a maid. But for a middle-class woman who couldn't afford a personal maid, this was a DIY project. She would have to heat the tongs in her own fire, test the temperature herself, and then try to maneuver the hot iron around her own head, often using a hand mirror. The risk of burning herself or her hair was exponentially higher. It's a small but telling example of how wealth didn't just buy luxury, it bought a small measure of safety from the very beauty standards that society imposed on everyone. The historical debate here isn't about the existence of these tools. They are well preserved in museums. Instead, scholars sometimes discuss the evolution of hair setting techniques. Before the widespread use of hot irons, women relied on wet setting. This involved wrapping hair in strips of cloth or paper rag curls or paper curls and leaving it to dry overnight. This method was far less damaging, but also less reliable and much more time-consuming. The hot iron was a technological advancement that offered speed and precision at the cost of safety and hair health. It was a trade-off many women were clearly willing to make. Mary finishes the last curl. The air is thick with the scent of heated hair and the faint, metallic smell of the cooling tongs. Your hairstyle is now complete. A towering, weighted, and heat-styled marvel. It is undeniably impressive, but your scalp is tender from the pulling. You can feel the radiating heat from the freshly made curls near your skin, and the ever-present headache is beginning its slow, predictable thrill. You are a perfect picture of Victorian elegance, but the image is held together by pins, pain, and the ever-present threat of a burn. The hairstyle is now structurally complete and artfully curled. It is a monument of braids and wrinkles, a true testament to Mary's skill. But as you sit there, feeling the strain on your scalp and neck, it's worth taking a moment to fully appreciate the illusion you are presenting to the world. The weight you feel is not just the weight of your own hair, it is the weight of a lie. Let's talk more about what's hidden inside that magnificent coiffure. The rats we mentioned earlier are just the beginning. The world of Victorian hairpieces was vast and varied. There were frisettes, which were pads of frizzy hair or horsehair used to create volume at the front and sides. There were switches, long wefts of human hair that could be braided or curled and integrated into your own. There were pre-made CHIGNOMs, entire barn-like structures that could be pinned on at the back of the head. Your hairstyle is less a product of your own follicles and more of an assemblage, a carefully constructed hybrid of your hair and the hair of strangers. Where did all this extra hair come from? The market for human hair was a massive, global industry. Much of it came from poor peasant women in countries like France, Germany, and Italy, who would sell their long tresses for a small sum of money. It was often their only valuable asset. This hair was then processed, cleaned, sorted by color, and sold to wig makers and hairdressers in fashion capitals like Paris and London. So the luxurious crowning glory of a wealthy Victorian woman was often built, quite literally, on the poverty of another. These hairpieces, while essential for the fashionable silhouette, were a significant source of your discomfort. They were often built on a wireframe or a stiff buckram base to give them structure. This framework, pinned tightly to your own hair, created pressure points on your scalp. The combination of the weight, the tight pinning, and these rigid internal structures is the perfect recipe for the neuralgia of the scalp. We spoke of a persistent, nagging headache that originates from the scalp itself. Furthermore, the sheer weight of this entire contraption, your hair, plus the added pieces, is a serious ergonomic problem. Your neck muscles are under constant strain to support the load. This isn't a metaphorical weight, it's a real, physical burden that leads to chronic neck pain, muscle stiffness, and could even contribute to long-term spinal issues. You've been conditioned to accept this discomfort as a normal part of being a well-dressed woman. The pain is just a quiet, humming background noise to your life. Here's a small, slightly macabre detail. One of the primary sources for hair to make these pieces was, in fact, the dead. Post-mortem hair harvesting was a real practice. It's a rather unsettling thought that the beautiful, lustrous curl pin just above your ear might have been cut from the head of a corpse. The industry was largely unregulated, and the provenance of the hair was rarely questioned by the end consumer. The academic discussion on this topic often revolves around the idea of authenticity and artifice in the 19th century. On one hand, the Victorian era placed a huge emphasis on natural beauty and moral purity. On the other hand, it was an age of incredible artifice. The ideal woman was supposed to have naturally thick, long, and beautiful hair. Yet to achieve the styles that demonstrated this, she had to resort to padding, extensions, and deception. Historians debate whether this was seen as hypocrisy or simply as a practical necessity, a white lie of fashion that everyone tacitly agreed to ignore. It was a collective performance where everyone knew the secret but no one acknowledged it. You gently touch the side of your elaborate hairstyle. It feels solid, almost helmet-like. It's both a part of you and completely alien. This heavy, painful, and deceptive construction is what you will present to the world as your natural crowning glory. It is a perfect symbol of the Victorian female ideal itself, a beautiful, impressive exterior that conceals a complex, often painful, and highly artificial reality. The weight on your head is a constant, physical reminder of the weight of the expectations you carry, and as if the physical strain weren't enough, some women would go one step further, chemically altering the very color of this elaborate construction. Your hair is now piled, padded, and pinned into a masterpiece of fashionable architecture. For many women, this would be the final step, but for the truly trend-conscious, or for those whose natural hair color is deemed unfashionable, there is one more process to endure: dyeing. The concept of dyeing your hair is not new to your era, but the Victorian age saw a surge in the commercial availability of hair dyes, driven by new chemical discoveries and the relentless pressure of fashion magazines. The desired shades could change with the season. For a time, influenced by the Empress Eugenie of France, reddish gold Titian hair was all the rage. At other times, a deep, uniform black was considered the height of sophistication, while blondes were often celebrated for their angelic appearance. If your natural color didn't align with the current trend, you might be tempted to change it. You consider the bottle of hair restorer on your vanity. The name itself is a euphemism. These products weren't restoring your natural color, they were dyes. Unlike the cosmetics for your face, they were completely unregulated and often dangerously toxic. Let's say you want to go darker. The most common black hair dyes of the period were progressive dyes, meaning they worked gradually over several applications. Their active ingredients were typically a combination of lead acetate and sulfur. When you comb this solution through your hair, the lead reacts with the sulfur in the hair's keratin, creating lead sulfide, a dark pigment that coats and stains the hair's shaft. The problem, of course, is the lead. Just like with your face powder, you are now combing a neurotoxin directly into your scalp. With each application, The lead is absorbed through your skin, adding to the toxic burden your body is already trying to manage from your makeup. The symptoms are the same: headaches, fatigue, nerve damage, and the slow, systemic poisoning we've already discussed. You are attacking your system from the front of your face and your scalp. What if you wanted to go lighter? Bleaching your hair was an even more aggressive and dangerous process. It often involved a cocktail of harsh chemicals like caustic soda, potassium permanganate, or nitric acid. These were powerful, corrosive agents that would strip the pigment from your hair, but they could also cause severe chemical burns to your scalp, permanent hair loss by destroying the follicles, and leave your hair a dry, brittle, straw-like wreck. A slightly more gentle method for achieving a fashionable Titian red or a deep brown involved using silver nitrate. This chemical, also used in photography and medicine, would stain the hair. However, it came with its own peculiar side effect. If used improperly, or if it dripped onto the skin, it could cause argyria, a condition where the silver particles deposit in the skin, causing it to turn a permanent, bluish-gray color. Imagine trying to dye your hair a lovely auburn and ending up with a smurf blue forehead for the rest of your life. Here's a particularly strange detail about the social perception of hair dye. Despite the availability of these products, the act of dyeing your hair was considered somewhat scandalous and morally suspect. It was associated with vanity, deception, and a certain fast or theatrical crowd. A respectable lady was not supposed to alter her God-given hair color. This is why the products were so often marketed with deceptive names like Hair Restorer, Color Reviver, or Perfector. The branding allowed women to buy and use the product while maintaining plausible deniability. You weren't dyeing your hair, you were simply restoring its youthful shade. This created a strange double standard where the fashion industry promoted a certain look. The chemical industry sold the tools to achieve it, but society still judged the women who used them. The historical debate here often focuses on this social hypocrisy. Scholars analyze advertisements, advice columns, and private letters to understand how women navigated this contradiction. Did they use eyes openly, or was it a carefully guarded secret, shared only with a trusted maid? The evidence suggests the latter. It was another layer of artifice, another secret part of the beauty routine that was meant to produce a natural result that was, in fact, anything but. For today, you decide against it. The risks seem too great, and your natural brown hair is, for the moment, acceptable. But the bottles sit on your vanity as a constant temptation, a reminder that, if fashion were to change, you might be forced to choose between social acceptance and dousing your head in poison. The physical construction of your beauty is now complete, but this elaborate, heavy, and difficult to maintain hairstyle creates one final, deeply unpleasant, and rarely discussed problem. You are now a finished product, a walking, breathing sculpture of Victorian femininity. From your tightly laced waist to your toxin-painted face to your heavily architected hair, you are the very picture of high society elegance. But as you prepare to go about your day, a tiny, nagging sensation begins on your scalp. A little itch. You subtly try to press a finger against the spot through the dense layers of hair, but it's no use. The itch is deep within the impenetrable fortress of your coiffure. This brings us to a deeply unglamorous and often ignored consequence of your elaborate hairstyle. It is a paradise for pests, specifically head lice. Let's be clear. Lice were a common problem across all classes in the 19th century, but the fashionable hairstyles of the wealthy created a uniquely welcoming environment for them. Your hair, as we've established, is a dense, firm, and rarely disturbed structure. It's filled with pads of horsehair and switches of other people's hair, which may not have been perfectly clean before being sold. This complex scaffold of organic material, pinned tightly to your head, is the loose equivalent of a luxury high-rise apartment building. The biggest issue is cleaning. A hairstyle like yours, which took hours to create, was not meant to be taken down every day. To do so would be incredibly impractical. Many women would try to make a hairstyle last for several days, or even a week. Simply by sleeping carefully, often propped up on pillows, and having their maid do minor repairs and touch-ups in the morning. This meant that your scalp was rarely getting a thorough washing. Shampoo as we know it didn't exist. Washing your hair was a major undertaking. It involved using harsh soaps made with lye, or strange concoctions like egg yolks or rosemary water. It was a messy, time-consuming process that would completely undo your elaborate style. Therefore, it was avoided for as long as possible. In between these major washes, you might use a dry shampoo, which was typically a powder like cornstarch or a root dusted onto the scalp to absorb oil. But this didn't actually clean anything, it just added another layer of material to the already crowded environment. This infrequent washing, combined with the warmth and shelter provided by the hairpieces, created the perfect breeding ground. A louse could live out its entire life cycle, happily laying eggs, knits, and multiplying. Completely undisturbed within the labyrinth of your braids and hair rats, the itch you feel is the first sign of an infestation. The cures for lice were as unpleasant as the problem itself. The most common treatments involved dousing the scalp and hair in toxic substances. Kerosene was a popular, if dangerously flammable, option. Solutions made from mercury compounds or arsenic were also used, turning your pest problem into yet another opportunity for self-poisoning. Less toxic, but more disturbing, remedies involved coating the hair in lard and then wrapping the head in a cloth for days, a method intended to suffocate the lice. Imagine the sheer discomfort and mess of having a lard-filled bonnet on your head for a weekend. Here's a particularly strange historical tidbit to combat this problem. Without having to use dangerous chemicals, some women employed a lice comb. These were very fine tooth combs made of metal or ivory, but a more peculiar tool was the head scratcher. These were long, elegant-looking sticks, often made of silver or ivory, with a small, carved hand or claw at the end. They were designed to be delicately inserted into the hairstyle to relieve an itch without disturbing the overall structure. So, if you were sitting in the parlor, you might see a lady subtly sliding a fancy stick into her hair for a quick scratch. It was a discreet acknowledgement of a very common, very itchy problem. The historical discussion around this topic is often one of silence. Personal hygiene, particularly problems like lice, was not something a respectable lady would ever write about in her diary or discuss in public. It was a source of deep shame and embarrassment. Historians have to piece this story together from medical texts, advertisements for cures, and the existence of artifacts like head scratchers and lice combs. The scholarly debate isn't about whether it happened, but about how the profound disconnect between the elegant, pristine image and the itchy, sometimes infested, reality was managed on a personal and psychological level. The itch on your scalp persists, a tiny, maddening secret hidden beneath your crown of glory. It is the ultimate irony. You have endured pain, poison, and physical restriction to project an image of perfect, flawless beauty, only to be plagued by one of the most common and humbling afflictions imaginable. And with your head now complete, it's time for the final piece of your daily armor, the vast, unwieldy cage that will dictate your every move. You are now dressed from the waist up, a model of costume coiffure, but the bottom half of your ensemble is what will truly define your presence in a room. Mary now brings forward the next essential piece of your structural underpinnings, the crinoline. In the mid-19th century, the fashionable silhouette demanded a voluminous, bell-shaped skirt of enormous proportions. To achieve this shape without weighing a woman down with dozens of heavy petticoats, as was done in previous decades, a new invention took the world by storm: the cage crinoline. And it is, quite literally, a cage. You step into it. It's a lightweight framework made of a series of flexible steel hoops, increasing in circumference as they go down, all held together with vertical cotton tapes. It fastens at your waist and falls to the floor, creating a huge, hollow dome around your legs. Over this cage, Mary will layer one or two petticoats to soften the ridges of the steel hoops, and then, finally, your actual dress skirt, which now has the support it needs to billow out into the perfect, fashionable dome. The immediate sensation is one of surreal freedom and profound restriction. All at once, inside the cage, your legs are, for the first time today, completely free. They aren't encumbered by layers of fabric. You can move them without feeling tangled in petticoats. But this small pocket of freedom exists inside a massive, rigid prison that dictates your every interaction with the world around you. Your personal space has just expanded to a radius of 3 or 4 feet in every direction. Navigating your own bedroom is now a challenge. You have to turn sideways to get through doorways. Sitting down on a chair becomes a complex maneuver that requires you to approach the seat, turn, and carefully gather and guide the back of the cage so that it collapses behind you rather than flipping up in front of you, a common and mortifying accident that would expose your legs and undergarments to the world. Walking is a strange, gliding motion. You are no longer a person walking, but a bell moving through space. The cage sways with a life of its own. A slight breeze can catch it like a sail, threatening your balance. Stairs are your mortal enemy. Going up, you have to lift the entire contraption in front of you. Going down, it presses against the back of your legs, threatening to trip you with every step. And the dangers were not just social. The crinoline was a genuine fire hazard. The fashion pages of your time are filled with tragic stories of women who died after getting too close to an open fireplace. The lightweight fabrics of their dresses would catch a spark, and the open, airy structure of the cage underneath would act as a perfect chimney, funneling air to the flames and turning the woman into a human inferno in seconds. It was such a common tragedy that the satirists of Punch magazine cruelly nicknamed the crinoline the fire worshipper's cage. Here's a bizarre but well-documented fact: crinolines were also a significant industrial hazard. In the 1862, a factory in Sheffield, England, reported the death of a female worker whose huge skirt got caught in the moving machinery, dragging her into the equipment. The sheer size of the garment made it completely impractical and dangerous for any woman who had to work near machinery, in a crowded space, or really do anything more strenuous than gliding across a ballroom floor. Despite these obvious drawbacks and dangers, the crinoline was wildly popular, worn by women across social classes. A wealthy woman's crinoline might be made of fine, flexible steel, while a working-class woman might wear a cheaper version made of cane or even inflatable rubber tubes. The historical debate here is not about its dangers, which were widely known and reported, but about its meaning. Why did women so enthusiastically embrace such a cumbersome and hazardous garment? Some historians argue it was a form of spatial assertion, a way for women, who had little social or political power, to physically claim a larger space for themselves. Others see it as the ultimate symbol of conspicuous consumption, a dress so impractical it loudly announced that the wearer did no physical labor. Still others interpret it through a more feminist lens, arguing that, compared to the crushing weight of multiple petticoats, the lightweight cage crinoline was actually a form of liberation, freeing the legs and making walking physically easier, despite its other absurdities. It's one of fashion history's great paradoxes. You give a little experimental sway, and the huge dome of your skirt sways with you. You are now fully assembled, a ship in full sail, ready to launch into the calm, predictable waters of your drawing room. You are a spectacle, but in this state of physical constraint, unable to breathe deeply, move freely, or see clearly. How do you actually interact with other people? You will have to rely on a different, more subtle language, the language of the fan. Finally, you are ready, encased in your corset, crowned with your heavy hair, and caged in your crinoline. You make your slow, gliding descent to the parlor. It's the middle of the afternoon, the time for receiving guests, as you settle into a specially designed wide armchair, conversation chair, built to accommodate the massive skirts. You pick up the one accessory that is absolutely essential for navigating a social situation in your condition: your fan. The fan is not just a tool for creating a breeze. Though in a stuffy room while wearing layers of clothing and being unable to breathe properly, that function is certainly a godsend. No, your fan is a sophisticated communication device. It is your lifeline, your shield, and your subtle weapon in the silent, nuanced warfare of Victorian social etiquette. In a world where you are expected to be quiet, demure, and emotionally reserved, the fan allows you to speak volumes without ever uttering a word. Your fan is a work of art in itself. It might be made of carved ivory sticks with a leaf of painted silk or paper, or perhaps it's a more delicate creation of lace and mother of pearl. When closed, it's an elegant baton. When open, it's a canvas for flirtation, disdain, and intrigue. An entire language of the fan has developed, published in pamphlets and ladies' magazines. While historians debate how formally this language was ever studied or applied, was it a real, codified system or more of a playful, romanticized myth, the basic gestures were certainly understood by all. It was a form of social shorthand. Imagine a young man you find dashing has just entered the room. You want to signal your interest, but it would be scandalously forward to speak to him directly or even make prolonged eye contact. Instead, you can use your fan. Resting it on your right cheek means yes. Resting it on your left cheek means no. Carrying your open fan in your left hand could signal I am desirous of your acquaintance. If you were to press a half-open fan to your lips, it would be a clear invitation you may kiss me. A very daring move. Indeed. Conversely, the fan is also your primary tool of defense. If a tiresome bore is approaching, you can signal your disinterest by fanning yourself very quickly, I am engaged, or, more pointedly, by closing your fan and tapping it on your left hand, I wish to be rid of you. It allows you to enforce social boundaries and express displeasure in a way that is considered graceful and feminine, without causing an open, unladylike scene. Here's a small but fascinating detail about the practicality of the fan. Beyond communication, it was a vital tool for managing the physical discomforts of your attire. The gentle breeze it creates on your face is a relief from the heat, but it also helps to mask the signs of your physical distress. If you feel a wave of faintness coming on from your tight corset, a few slow, deliberate waves of the fan can help you discreetly regain your composure. It can also be used as a screen. You can hide a yawn, a subtle grimace of pain from your pinching shoes, or even a blush behind its delicate leaf. It allows you to maintain the placid, serene expression expected of you, no matter what turmoil is happening underneath. The fan also served as a kind of social fidget spinner for a woman constrained in every other way. The small, repetitive motions of opening, closing, and fluttering the fan provided a tiny, acceptable outlet for nervous energy. It gave your hands something to do, a focus point in situations that could be socially rigid and stultifying. The scholarly debate on the language of the fan is quite lively. Some historians argue that the detailed vocabularies published at the time were largely a marketing gimmick by fan makers, a romantic fiction that people enjoyed but didn't actually use as a strict code. Others contend that while a full, dictionary-like language might be an exaggeration, a core set of widely understood gestures certainly existed and was a key part of non-verbal social interaction. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. A few key signals were common knowledge, while the more complex phrases were more fantasy than reality. You see your friend, another lady in an equally voluminous dress, signal to you from across the room by tapping her closed fan against her chin. It's a playful gesture, perhaps meaning I have something to tell you. You respond by slowly fanning yourself, a sign of placid acknowledgement. The conversation has begun long before words are exchanged. In this world of extreme physical and emotional restraint, the fan is your voice. It is your power. It is a small island of expressive freedom in an ocean of rules. But what happens when the pains and poisons of your beauty routine finally catch up to you in a way that even a fan can't hide? What happens when you actually get sick? Let's say the day comes when the accumulated toll of your beauty routine becomes undeniable. The chronic headaches from your heavy hair, the digestive misery from your compressed organs, the nerve pain from your lead-based makeup, the anxiety from your mercury creams, it all coalesces into a state of genuine, debilitating illness. You are perpetually exhausted, in constant pain, and your nerves are short. You finally do what a respectable woman does: you consult a doctor. You sit in the doctor's dimly lit office, a space that smells of carbolic acid and old paper. You describe your symptoms: the fatigue, the shortness of breath, the stomach pains, the melancholia, the strange tingling in your hands. You are describing, with textbook accuracy, the effects of corseting and chronic heavy metal poisoning. The doctor, a well-meaning man in a sober suit, listens patiently, nodding his head. He examines you, perhaps by taking your pulse and looking at your tongue. And then, he delivers his diagnosis. It's not lead poisoning. It's not organ displacement. It is, he proclaims with confidence, a classic case of female hysteria. Hysteria was the great catch-all diagnosis for women in the 19th century. The term itself comes from the Greek word hystere, meaning uterus. The ancient Greeks believed that the uterus could wander around the female body, causing all manner of physical and emotional chaos. While your Victorian doctor no longer believes in a literal wandering womb, the core idea persists: your problems are believed to originate from your inherently flawed and unstable female nature. Any symptom a woman presented that wasn't a clear-cut, easily identifiable disease like influenza or cholera could be, and often was, attributed to hysteria. The list of potential symptoms was absurdly long and contradictory. It included everything from anxiety, irritability, and fainting to muscle spasms, shortness of breath, loss of appetite, and even a tendency to cause trouble. Basically, any deviation from a state of quiet, cheerful submissiveness could be pathologized as hysteria. So, your very real, physically induced symptoms are dismissed. They are not seen as the logical result of your clothing, your cosmetics, or your lifestyle. Instead, they are interpreted as evidence of your emotional and psychological weakness. The doctor might explain that your delicate nervous system has been overstimulated, perhaps by reading too many novels or by a lack of domestic fulfillment. He is, in effect, blaming you for your own illness. The treatments prescribed were often as unhelpful as the diagnosis. A common prescription was the rest cure, famously detailed by Drive S. W. Mitchell. This involved complete isolation, bed rest, a high-fat diet to increase body weight, and a total prohibition on any creative or intellectual activity. You would be forbidden from reading, writing, or even talking too much. The goal was to force your supposedly overactive mind into a state of placid emptiness. In reality, it was a recipe for depression and intellectual starvation. Another common treatment was a pelvic massage, performed by the doctor, which was intended to induce a hysterical paroxysm, what we would now recognize as an orgasm, to relieve the supposed uterine congestion. This baffling and invasive practice highlights how deeply misunderstood the female body was. For less severe cases, the doctor might prescribe tonics laced with alcohol or opiates, creating a new problem of addiction, or simply recommend travel, a change of scenery, or, most tellingly, marriage and pregnancy, under the belief that fulfilling your natural domestic role was the ultimate cure. Here's a small, grim detail: because the symptoms of hysteria were so vague, and because it was seen as a sign of upper-class delicacy, some women may have even leaned into the diagnosis. It was a socially acceptable way to be ill, to retreat from the pressures of society without being stigmatized for a more vulgar or definitive disease. It became another part of the performance of femininity. The historical debate surrounding hysteria is immense and central to the study of women's history in medicine. Historians today see it not as a real disease, but as a powerful tool of social control. It was a way for a patriarchal medical establishment to dismiss, pathologize, and control women whose bodies and minds were rebelling against the incredibly restrictive roles assigned to them. The central question scholars now ask is not what was hysteria, but what societal purpose did the diagnosis of hysteria serve? You leave the doctor's office with a bottle of useless stomach and a head full of confusing advice. You have been told that the pain is all in your head, a product of your femininity. The true culprit's the corset, the lead paint, The arsenic wafers remain unaccused, sitting innocently on your vanity, waiting for you tomorrow morning. Your suffering has been invalidated, your reality denied, and this contradiction lies at the very heart of your existence. You return home from the doctor's office, the hysteria diagnosis echoing in your mind. You are meant to be the angel in the house, a creature of supreme moral strength and emotional placidity. Yet, you're also told you are inherently frail, your body and mind prone to breaking down from the slightest provocation. This is the central, maddening paradox of your existence, the simultaneous expectation of incredible resilience and extreme fragility. On one hand, you are expected to be physically weak. The ideal of beauty, as we've explored, is one of delicate, almost sickly, frailty. Your corseted, oxygen-deprived body, prone to fainting, is seen as the pinnacle of femininity. You are not supposed to be robust or strong. Overt physical capability is considered masculine and unladylike. Your weakness is a status symbol. It signifies that you come from a class where you don't need to perform physical labor. It is, in itself, a form of decoration. This performance of fragility is a full-time job. You must glide, not stride. You must speak softly. You must have delicate appetites. You must exhibit a refined sensitivity that can be overwhelmed by a sad story or a shocking piece of news. Your entire being is meant to be a testament to a life of protected leisure. A beautiful, fragile flower kept safe within the greenhouse of your home. But on the other hand, look at what is actually demanded of you. Beneath this veneer of helplessness, you are the chief operating officer of a complex domestic enterprise. You are responsible for managing the household staff, the cook, the maids, the footmen. You must have the organizational skills of a quartermaster, planning menus, keeping household accounts, and overseeing the purchasing of supplies. You must have the diplomatic skills of an ambassador, managing the personalities and squabbles of your staff. This requires a sharp mind, a firm hand, and a great deal of practical knowledge. Then there is the emotional labor. You are the spiritual core of the family. It is your job to be a ceaseless wellspring of comfort, sympathy, and moral guidance for your husband and children. You must absorb your husband's stresses from the outside world without burdening him with your own. You must raise your children to be pious, well-behaved members of society. This requires the patience of a saint and the wisdom of a philosopher. And then comes the most physically demanding task of all, childbirth. In an era before modern obstetrics and pain relief, giving birth was a dangerous and often traumatic ordeal. The maternal mortality rate was staggeringly high. You were expected to face this trial by fire repeatedly, producing numerous children, especially a male heir, to secure the family line. And here, the paradox becomes truly brutal. The very tool used to create your fashionable, frail figure, the corset, was actively damaging your body's ability to handle pregnancy and childbirth. A lifetime of compressing your abdomen and pelvis could misalign the pelvic bones and weaken the abdominal muscles, making labor more difficult and dangerous. So you are meant to look as if you couldn't lift a teacup, but you are expected to run a small corporation from your drawing room. You are meant to be emotionally fragile, yet you must be the unshakable emotional bedrock of your entire family. You are meant to be physically delicate, yet you must endure the life-threatening rigors of childbirth over and over again. Here's a peculiar detail that highlights this contradiction: the sports that were deemed acceptable for women, activities like archery, croquet, or gentle lawn tennis, were permitted because they could be performed while maintaining a degree of grace and without excessive, unladylike exertion. They were sports that could be played in a modified corset and a long skirt. They reinforced the idea of contained, controlled physical activity, rather than true athleticism. The historical debate on this topic is rich. Scholars argue about the agency of women within this contradictory framework. Were they simply victims of these impossible expectations? Or did they find ways to navigate and even leverage this paradox? Some historians suggest that the angel in the house ideal was a cage. But it was a cage that also granted women a certain kind of authority within the domestic sphere. By accepting the role of the family's moral guardian, women could wield significant influence over their children and the social and religious life of the household. It was a limited power, to be sure, but it was power nonetheless. You stand in your parlor, the doctor's useless stomach still in your hand. You are trapped between two irreconcilable ideals. You are both the delicate orchid and the sturdy oak tree that supports the whole garden. The strain of trying to be both at once is immense. It is no wonder so many women like you were diagnosed with hysteria. The real surprise is that you haven't collapsed under the weight of this impossible contradiction sooner. But somewhere, in the quiet corners of society, a few brave voices are beginning to suggest that perhaps the ideal itself is the problem. Amidst the silent, personal suffering and the chorus of medical diagnoses blaming your own female nature, you start to hear faint, dissenting whispers. They are not loud, not yet, but they are there. They come from the pages of radical pamphlets, from the lecture circuits of female reformers, and from small groups of women who have begun to question the very foundations of the world you inhabit. This is the sound of a quiet rebellion. One of the most prominent fronts of this rebellion is the dress reform movement. A growing number of women, and some male doctors, are beginning to argue that the fashionable clothing you wear every day is not just uncomfortable, but is a primary cause of women's poor health and a tool of their oppression. They see your corset not as a symbol of beauty, but as an instrument of torture. They see your heavy skirts and crinolinemania not as elegant, but as unhygienic and dangerous. The reformers propose radical alternatives. The most famous and most scandalous of these is the bloomer, named after activist Amelia Bloomer, who promoted it in her journal The Lily. The outfit consisted of a loose-fitting tunic over a pair of voluminous trousers gathered at the ankle. To you, and to mainstream Victorian society, this is utterly shocking. A woman in trousers is seen as an outrageous rejection of femininity, an attempt to usurp the male role. Women who dared to wear bloomers in public were met with ridicule, harassment, and social ostracism. Cartoonists had a field day, depicting them as ugly, aggressive, man-hating spinsters. While the bloomer costume itself failed to catch on with the general public, the ideas behind it slowly began to gain traction. More moderate reformers argued for less extreme changes, emancipation waists or liberty bodices, which were soft, unstructured undergarments that provided support without the rigid boning of a corset. They advocated for lighter skirts, perhaps shortened to the ankle to avoid dragging in the mud and filth of the streets. They argued that women's clothing should be designed for health, comfort, and freedom of movement, not for the arbitrary whims of fashion. This rebellion wasn't just about clothing. It was connected to a broader push for women's health and education. Reformers argued that girls needed physical education just as much as boys did. They fought for girls to be allowed to play sports, to exercise, and to develop strong, healthy bodies. They challenged the ideal of the pale, fainting lily and promoted a new ideal of a vigorous, capable woman. Here's a specific, fascinating example of this pushback: the Rational Dress Society, founded in London in 1881. Its motto was "The Rational Dress Society protests against the introduction of any fashion in dress that either deforms the figure, impedes the movements of the body, or in any way tends to injure the health." They held exhibitions showcasing rational clothing and published journals promoting their cause. They were a formal organization dedicated to fighting the tyranny of fashion. Alongside these movements, a new generation of female doctors began to emerge. Having fought their way into medical schools, they brought a fresh perspective to women's health. They were less likely to dismiss their female patients' complaints as hysteria and more likely to look for the physical root causes of their suffering. They became powerful advocates for dress reform and healthier lifestyles, lending medical authority to what was once dismissed as a radical, fringe idea. The historical debate here centers on the effectiveness and reach of these early reform movements. Some historians argue that they were largely confined to a small, educated, and often eccentric elite, and that their ideas had little impact on the average woman until the very end of the century. Others contend that while their direct successes were limited, They planted crucial seeds of change. They started a conversation. They forced society to at least consider the possibility that these beauty standards were not natural or inevitable, but were socially constructed and deeply harmful. They laid the groundwork for the more dramatic changes in fashion and women's roles that would come in the 20th century. You read a smuggled copy of a pamphlet from one of these societies. The words on the page are a revelation. They articulate the vague feelings of pain and restriction you felt your whole life. They tell you that your suffering is not a personal failing but a shared, systemic problem. The idea is both terrifying and exhilarating. To reject the corset would be to reject everything your society has taught you about being a woman. It would mean facing ridicule and being labeled as a strong-minded or unsexed female, one of the worst insults of your time. But the seed of rebellion has been planted. So now, you continue to wear the corset. You continue the daily rituals. But something inside you has shifted. You are starting to see the cage for what it is. And as you contemplate these new, dangerous ideas, you may soon face the ultimate test of the conflict between your body and your clothing, the prospect of motherhood. The whispers of rebellion might be stirring in your mind, but for now, you continue to follow the script laid out for you, and the next chapter in the life of a respectable married woman is, inevitably, pregnancy. This is supposed to be your ultimate fulfillment, the pinnacle of your feminine purpose, but in your corseted world, it is a time fraught with unique dangers and discomforts. A 9-month battle waged between biology and fashion. When you first realize you are pregnant, you face a dilemma. Society demands that your condition be concealed for as long as possible. Pregnancy was considered delicate, private state, not something to be publicly displayed. So, for the first few months, you continue to wear your standard corset, perhaps loosening the laces just a bit. You are literally compressing your expanding uterus, putting pressure on the growing fetus in the name of maintaining a fashionable silhouette. As the pregnancy becomes impossible to hide, you can no longer wear your regular, rigid corset. You might switch to a maternity corset. This sounds like a concession to comfort, but it was often just as restrictive. It was a specially designed corset with adjustable lacing and elastic panels, intended not to free your abdomen, but to support the pregnancy and maintain a neat, contained shape. The advertisements for these garments promised to preserve the figure and prevent you from looking matronly. The goal was still to control and sculpt the body, even as it was undergoing its most natural transformation. Wearing a corset of any kind during pregnancy, as you can imagine, is a terrible idea. The constant pressure on your abdomen could restrict blood flow to the placenta, potentially hindering fetal growth. It exacerbated all the usual discomforts of pregnancy: shortness of breath, indigestion, back pain, and turned them from annoyances into serious afflictions. You can barely breathe at the best of times now, with a growing baby pushing your organs up towards your diaphragm. Every breath is a desperate gasp. And then comes the delivery. A lifetime of wearing a corset has not prepared your body for this moment. Your core muscles, which should be strong enough to help push the baby out, have been weakened by years of artificial support. They are atrophied and ineffective. More alarmingly, there is evidence to suggest that years of tight lacing starting from a young age could actually deform the pelvis. The constant pressure could push the pelvic bones into a slightly narrower, more constricted shape, making it physically more difficult for the baby to pass through the birth canal. This could lead to prolonged, obstructed labor, increasing the risk of death for both you and your child. The medical community of your time was deeply divided and often confused about this. Some doctors railed against corsets in pregnancy, correctly identifying them as a source of danger. Others, however, actually prescribed maternity corsets, believing they offered necessary support to the womb and back, and prevented the baby from jostling around too much. As a patient, the advice you received was a lottery, dependent entirely on which doctor you happened to see. Here's a particularly sad and bizarre detail related to this: the fear of infant mortality was so high, and the understanding of pregnancy so poor, that all sorts of folk beliefs and anxieties flourished. Some people believe that a mother's negative thoughts or a shocking experience could physically mark or harm the fetus, a concept known as maternal impression. This placed an immense psychological burden on you, on top of the physical agony. You had to constantly police your own thoughts and emotions, terrified that a moment of fear or sadness could doom your unborn child. The historical debate here often focuses on the gap between prescriptive literature and lived experience. How did real women navigate this? Did they defiantly cast off their corsets the moment they found out they were pregnant, retreating into the privacy of their homes, or did social pressure compel them to keep up appearances for as long as possible? Diaries and letters from the period suggest a wide range of behaviors. Some women complained bitterly about the corsets but wore them anyway, while others spoke of the immense relief of finally being able to abandon them, at least temporarily. You endure the months of constrained misery. You feel the life inside you growing, a powerful, natural force pushing against the artificial boundaries of your clothing. The quiet rebellion you felt reading those pamphlets now becomes a physical, internal reality. Your own body is fighting back against the cage you've spent your life building. The conflict between the angel in the house and the biological reality of being a woman has never been more acute. As you approach childbirth, you are not just preparing to bring a new life into the world, you are facing the ultimate physical consequence of a lifetime spent in pursuit of an impossible ideal. The months pass. Perhaps you have successfully navigated the perils of childbirth and are now a mother. Or perhaps you are simply moving through another season of social calls on domestic management. But the rebellious thoughts, the physical discomforts, and the constant, grinding effort of it all have begun to take a different kind of toll. The battle is no longer just being fought in your bones and organs, but in the quiet, private theater of your own mind. You sit before your mirror, not to apply your lead makeup, but to simply look, and you feel a profound sense of alienation from the person staring back at you. Who is this woman in the glass? Her posture is unnaturally rigid, her waist impossibly small, her skin is a pale, artificial mask, her eyes are wide and dark, but her vision is blurry, her hair is a heavy, elaborate sculpture that aches at the roots. She is a perfect specimen of Victorian femininity. She is also a complete stranger. This is the psychological strain, the quiet, undiagnosable anguish of striving for an ideal that is physically, medically, and emotionally unsustainable. Every single day, you wake up and engage in a series of acts that cause you pain and discomfort. You willingly encase yourself in a restrictive device, paint your face with known toxins, and endure hours of tedious and painful hairstyling. You do this because you have been taught, from birth, that your value lies in your appearance. Your beauty is your currency, your duty, and your primary measure of success. The cognitive dissonance is staggering. You are praised for your natural beauty, a beauty that is achieved through the most artificial means imaginable. You are admired for your delicate health, a state of perpetual, low-grade illness induced by your own daily routine. You are expected to be serene and placid, while your body is in a constant state of low-level stress and pain. This chasm between the illusion you must project and the reality you experience creates a deep and persistent anxiety. You start to monitor yourself constantly. Is your posture correct? Is your expression pleasant? Are you showing any unladylike signs of discomfort or fatigue? You become a guard in your own prison, perpetually policing yourself for any deviation from the ideal. This hypervigilance is exhausting. It leaves little room for spontaneity, for genuine emotion, for the simple, unsuspicious pleasure of just being in your own body. This immense mental load was rarely, if ever, acknowledged. In a world that had no language for concepts like mental health or body dysmorphia, there was no way to articulate this specific kind of suffering. If you were to express these feelings of alienation and anxiety, you'd likely be met with the familiar diagnosis of hysteria or melancholia. You would be told you are simply being morbid or indulging in feminine fantasies. There was no framework for understanding that the beauty standard itself was the disease. Here's a small, poignant detail that captures this psychological pressure: the rise of the photograph. Unlike a painted portrait, which could be idealized and softened by the artist, The photograph captured a more stark, and often unforgiving, reality. Having your portrait taken became a new source of anxiety. You would have to sit perfectly still, often for several seconds, holding a rigid, pleasant expression, knowing that the camera would capture every detail. These photographs, which you would then display in your home or exchange with family, became a permanent record of your ability or failure to live up to the visual ideal. The historical debate on this topic is, by its nature, speculative but deeply compelling. It involves reading between the lines of diaries, letters, and even fiction from the period. When a woman writes in her diary that she is feeling low or out of sorts for no apparent reason, what is she really describing? Historians of emotion and psychology argue that these vague expressions of malaise often point to the profound, unnamed stress of living under such oppressive physical and social constraints. They analyze the high rates of nervous disorders and the widespread use of opiate and alcohol-based soothing tonics among women as evidence of a population trying to medicate away a deep, existential unease. You look at your hands, resting on the vanity. They are the hands that manage a household, that could soothe a child, that could create beautiful embroidery. But they are also the hands that apply the poison, that pour the maces, that pin the heavy hair. They are both the hands of the prisoner and the prison guard. The ghost in the mirror looks back at you, her expression placid and unreadable. The cost of creating her has been immense, and as the years pass, that cost will become a debt that can never be repaid, written permanently on your body. The years spin by, measured out in a succession of changing sleeve shapes and shifting skirt widths. You have performed your role flawlessly. You have been the angel in the house, the perfect wife, the devoted mother, the elegant hostess. But time is the one thing that fashion cannot conquer, and the decades of dedication to this brutal beauty standard have left their indelible marks. Now, in the twilight of your life, you are faced with the irreversible consequences. The final bill for a lifetime of beauty. You are learning how to ungracefully grow old. The first and most obvious toll is on your skeleton. The dull ache in your back that began with your first corset has become a constant, grinding companion. Years of relying on the corset for support have left your own core muscles weakened with it. Now, in your later years, you may find it difficult to even sit or stand upright without some form of support. But more than that, your very bones have been reshaped. You may have a permanently curved spine, a condition known as scoliosis, a direct result of the unnatural posture forced upon you for decades. Your lower ribs are pinched inward, a permanent testament to the relentless pressure of the hollow bone in steel. Your internal organs, after a lifetime of being pushed around, are in a state of chronic protest. The chronic constipation and indigestion of your youth have evolved into more serious, persistent digestive ailments. Your liver and other organs may be functioning poorly after years of compression and fighting off a slow trickle of toxins from your cosmetics. The shortness of breath that once made you fashionably faint has now become a genuine respiratory weakness, leaving you susceptible to bronchitis and pneumonia. And then there are the poisons. The lead, mercury, and arsenic you so carefully applied have been accumulating in your bones and tissues for decades. Now, they are a part of you. You might suffer from chronic nerve pain, tremors, or a persistent mental fog that you mistake for the simple signs of aging. The beautiful, translucent skin you sacrificed so much for is now sallow, dry, and prematurely aged, damaged by the very toxins you used to perfect it. The damage is not just skin deep, it's systemic. Even your crowning glory has paid the price. The constant pulling from heavy hairstyles and the use of hot irons and chemical dyes have taken their toll. Your hair may be thin and patchy, a condition called traction alopecia, where the follicles have been permanently damaged by years of strain. The neuroglia in your scalp might now be a permanent fixture. Here's a particularly cruel detail of this aging process as your body changes. As you gain weight or your figure softens with age, the pressure to maintain the fashionable silhouette can become even more intense and more painful. The corset, which was once a tool to achieve an ideal, now becomes a desperate measure to fight the natural course of aging. a battle that your body will inevitably lose. The historical evidence for these long-term effects is compelling. It comes from medical texts of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, which began to draw clearer lines between the fashions of the previous generation and the chronic health problems of older women. It also comes from osteoarchaeology, the study of human skeletal remains. When archaeologists excavate Victorian-era cemeteries, they can literally see the evidence of corseting written on the bones of the women buried there. The deformed ribs and curved spines tell a silent story of a lifetime of constriction. The academic debate here is often about causation versus correlation for any individual case. It's difficult to say with 100% certainty that a woman's scoliosis, for example, was caused only by her corset and not by other factors like nutrition or congenital conditions. However, when you see the same patterns of skeletal deformity appearing over and over again in a specific population, upper and middle class Victorian women, it becomes a powerful indicator of a widespread, culturally induced pathology. You look at your reflection in the mirror now. The face that looks back is no longer the stranger of your youth, but a landscape of your life's choices. You see the fine lines, the discolored skin, the thinning hair. You feel the ache in your bones. The pursuit of an impossible, temporary beauty has left you with a legacy of permanent, tangible pain. The cruelest tyranny of all is that the very standards that you dedicated your life to upholding have ultimately destroyed the one thing they were meant to preserve: your health and vitality. The perfect Victorian lady was a fleeting illusion. The chronic pain is real. You find yourself in an art gallery, a quiet, grand space where the air is still and smells of oil paint and old varnish. You move slowly, leaning perhaps on the arm of one of your children, your body dictating a gentle, deliberate pace. You stop in front of a large, gilt-framed portrait from your youth. It might not be a portrait of you, specifically, but it is a portrait of your generation, of the ideal you were raised to be. There she is on the canvas, the perfect Victorian woman. She is seated in a plush armchair, her back impossibly straight. Her waist is a tiny, delicate span, emphasized by the dramatic hourglass shape of her bodice. Her skin is flawless, the color of cream and pearls, with just a hint of a rosy blush on her cheeks. Her eyes are large and soulful, gazing out with a look of demure contemplation. Her hair is a magnificent, glossy construction of intricate braids and perfect curls. She is the epitome of grace, piety, and refined beauty. She is the angel in the house, captured forever in oil and pigment. And as you stand before her, with your aching back, your damaged nerves, and your labored breathing, you finally see the truth with absolute clarity. She is a complete and utter fiction. That portrait is not a reflection of reality. It is a monument to an illusion. You know, with the intimate knowledge of lived experience, exactly what is happening inside that beautiful frame. You know that the woman on the canvas cannot draw a full breath. You know that her liver and stomach are being crushed. You know that her flawless skin is a mask of lead and her wide eyes are blurred with belladonna. You know that her glorious hair is a heavy, painful, and probably deceptive construction that teaches. You know that beneath the serene expression, there is a low hum of pain, anxiety, and physical misery. The artist didn't paint the truth. The artist painted the ideal. He painted the corset, the poison, and the pain out of the picture, leaving only the beautiful, impossible surface. The portrait is a conspiracy of silence, a collective agreement to ignore the suffering and celebrate the facade. This realization brings with it a strange sense of peace. The ghost in the mirror that haunted you for so long was never a reflection of you. It was a reflection of this painting. You spent your life trying to contort your living, breathing, aching body into the shape of this two-dimensional fantasy. You were not failing to be a perfect woman, you were succeeding at the impossible task of surviving the attempt. A small, poignant detail from art history supports this. Conservators who have analyzed the pigments used in 19th century portraits have found that some of the most luminous, pearlescent skin tones were achieved by the artists using lead white paint, the very same substance women were using on their own faces. The artifice on the skin and the artifice on the canvas were one and the same. The poison was part of the aesthetic, both in life and in art. The historical debate here often revolves around the concept of performance. Scholars like Judith Butler have argued that gender itself is a performance, a series of acts and gestures that we learn and repeat. From this perspective, the Victorian woman in the portrait is the ultimate performer. Her entire existence, from her underwear to her facial expression, is a highly rehearsed and physically demanding role. Historians debate the extent to which women were knowing participants in this performance versus unwitting victims of it. Were they celebrating the artifice, or were they trapped by it looking at this painting? You understand that the answer is both. The young woman in the portrait will never grow old. She will never suffer from a curved spine or a wandering spleen. She will never feel the long-term effects of mercury on her mind. She is frozen in time, a perfect, beautiful lie. You, on the other hand, have lived. You have endured. You have survived the ideal. You turn away from the painting and walk slowly out of the gallery, back into the living, breathing world. The sun is setting, casting long shadows. The rigid, painful beauty of your era is beginning to fade, just like the light. And as you step out of the 19th century and back into the quiet of your own room, you are left with one final, lingering question. Has that ghost in the portrait truly vanished, or has she simply learned to haunt the modern world in a different guise? You feel the hard floor of the art gallery dissolve beneath your feet, the scent of oil paint and varnish fading into the familiar air of your own room. The journey is over. You are back. The corset is gone. The lead paint is washed away. The heavy crown of hair has been lifted. You can take a deep, slow, satisfying breath, and another. The simple act feels like an incredible luxury. The world you've just left behind seems distant and almost absurd. A world of arsenic wafers and wandering spleens, of fainting couches and fire-hazard skirts. It's easy to look back from our modern vantage point and feel a sense of smug superiority. We would never be so foolish. We would never sacrifice our health so completely for the sake of such a ridiculous, painful ideal. But would we? This is the echo that lingers long after the story ends. The brutal standards of the Victorian era may be gone, but the fundamental conflict between biology and beauty, between the real female body and the idealized one, has not disappeared. It has simply changed its shape, becoming more subtle, more technologically advanced, and in some ways, even more insidious. The corset is no longer made of hollowbone and steel, but its ghost lives on. It lives in the waist trainers that promise an hourglass figure through compression. It lives in the restrictive diets and cleanses that shrink the body from the inside out. It lives in the digitally altered images that present a waist as impossibly small as any tight-laced Victorian ideal, creating a standard that is just as unattainable for a living, breathing human being. The poisonous beauty counter hasn't vanished either, it has become more sophisticated. We no longer use leadened mercury, but we inject neurotoxins into our faces to paralyze muscles and smooth wrinkles. We undergo painful chemical peels that burn away the top layer of skin. We use countless products filled with complex chemicals whose long-term effects are still, in some cases, not fully understood. The promise is the same: a flawless, youthful appearance, achieved through a process that is painful, expensive, and not without risk. The tyranny of hair continues. The hot irons are now ceramic and temperature controlled, but the damage from excessive heat remains. The dyes are less likely to contain lead, but the quest for the perfect, trend-driven color continues. The heavy hair pieces have been replaced by meticulously applied extensions, which can still cause traction alopecia. The desire for a crowning glory that is longer, thicker, and more perfect than what nature provided is as strong as ever. The most potent echo, perhaps, is the psychological strain. The ghost in the mirror is still with us. She has just moved from the silver-backed glass of the vanity to the glowing screen of the smartphone. She is in the endless scroll of filtered images, the curated perfection of social media feeds, where everyone appears to be living a flawless, beautiful life. The pressure to perform, to project an image of effortless perfection, may be more intense now than ever before. Because the audience is no longer just the people in your parlor, it is the entire world. The historical debate about this is happening right now. In real time, we are living it. Future historians will look back at our era and analyze the beauty standards we chose to follow. They will debate the psychological impact of social media, the long-term effects of our cosmetic procedures, and the ways in which we performed our own versions of gender and beauty. They will ask the same questions about us that we ask about the Victorians. Did they know it was harmful? Why did they do it? Were they victims or willing participants? The story of the Victorian woman is not just a story about the past. It's a cautionary tale. It's a mirror that reflects our own anxieties and our own compromises. It reminds us that the pursuit of an impossible ideal, no matter how beautifully packaged, always comes at a cost. The cage may have changed its form, but the challenge remains the same: to find a way to live comfortably and authentically in our own bodies, in a world that is always telling us we need to be fixed. The evening has grown late, and our long journey through time has finally come to its end. You can feel the weight of the story settling, not as a burden, but as a deep, quiet stillness. The echoes of the past are fading now, softening at the edges, becoming less like a history lesson and more like the first hazy images of a dream. Let the details blur: the scent of lavender and lead, the whisper of a silk fan, the dull ache of a spine held to straight for too long. They are all just stories now, drifting away on the slow, gentle current of the night. Imagine the soft, heavy velvet of those Victorian curtains, not as something that keeps the world out, but as a gentle blanket for your mind. The stillness in that old, quiet house is now your own stillness. The soft background hum of the fan is just the sound of the world breathing as it sleeps. There are no more expectations to meet, no more ideals to strive for. The performance is over. All that is left is rest, deep and true. You can let go now. Let your breathing be full and easy, your body be soft and comfortable. You are safe in your own time, in your own bed, drifting peacefully toward the shores of sleep. The past is a closed book, and your own dreams are just beginning. The end of the article. Good night.